Animal Kingdom was originally supposed to have a lot more dragons, but it wound up having 0. Supposedly, the Imagineers who had designed the dragon-themed roller coaster for Animal Kingdom only to have it cut when the park was over budget, were unhappy. So they took their dragon and traveled up I-4, where they joined the team designing Islands of Adventure, including the Lost Continent, a land themed to myths of all kinds, including Greek gods, Arabian adventures, and Arthurian legends. The far end was home to Merlinwood, a forest full of wizards and unicorns, and yes, dragons. Dueling Dragons, to be precise. The ride was a relatively basic suspended coaster with multiple inversions. What made it really stand out is that the dragons really did duel. There were actually 2 coasters with similar designs intertwined with each other, one representing the ice dragon, Blizzroc, and one representing the fire dragon, Pyroc. The fire and ice trains would be sent out of the stations together with their speeds kept in sync, even going as far as to weigh the trains to adjust for how heavy guests were so the timing would be perfect. This resulted in the 2 coasters having multiple near misses, where the fire and ice trains would come as close as 18 inches to each other as they raced past. Because of these near misses, the ride had the rare distinction of having both a minimum and a maximum height for riders. Beyond just the fact that the dragons of Dueling Dragons dueled, there was another thing that made this ride stand out: the queue line. Fully immersive queues in general were still relatively rare for theme parks back in the late 90s, and they were almost always used for slow-moving dark rides. They were uncommon for thrill rides and even more uncommon for intense roller coasters. Despite this, the nearly half-mile-long queue for Dueling Dragons was one of the best in all of Orlando when it opened. Taking guests through a ruined castle and into hidden caverns. Stained glass windows enchanted by Merlin would come alive to tell the tale. One room was set ablaze, showing the wrath of Pyroc. Another was frozen over, showing the mighty fury of Blizzroc. At the end of the dark and twisting tunnels, guests were asked to choose thy fate. This was the time to decide and then board the coaster of your choosing. The queue was incredible, and it showed Universal the effect a great queue can have on improving guest experience. A lesson they took to heart, going on to create some of the most incredible queue lines in the entire world. Unfortunately, in 2011, the Dueling Dragons stopped dueling. There were 2 instances in the summer of that year where loose items fell from one train and hit someone on the other train during a near miss. One of the men involved even lost his eye, so strict rules about loose articles needing to be placed in lockers were added, and the dueling element was removed. Without the signature feature of the coaster, the popularity started to dip, and with the Wizarding World of Harry Potter being built around it replacing Merlinwood, it was clear the ride's days were numbered. It had a pretty simple retheme in 2010, becoming Dragon Challenge to fit in with the Potter theming, but it always felt temporary, especially with how underwhelming the decor on the ride itself was compared to the rest of the Wizarding World. In 2017, the ride closed for good. It was demolished to make way for a new, more family-friendly and heavily themed roller coaster, Hagrid's Magical Creature Motorbike Adventure. And while it is a better ride by most accounts, Dueling Dragons definitely did have the cooler queue line. Big thanks and shout out to Agent 00 Sonic and Books for suggesting this topic. Any excuse to talk about dragons is a good one. I'd like to take a moment to thank my sponsor for today's episode. I'd like to take this moment, but I can't because I don't have one, although I am more than willing to sell out completely to anyone. I have 0 standards.